The startup electric vehicle world changes rapidly. And this time, I think one particular company may have bitten off more than it could chew. But before I get going with that, I do just want to put a little clarification to the Arcimoto video that we made earlier this week. In it, I incorrectly identified the partnership that Arcimoto has with DHL as being for delivery vehicles, which is, of course, incorrect. It is delivering vehicles to customers for Arcimoto, although I'm pretty sure in the future a last mile delivery option wouldn't be beyond the bounds of possibility. But I thought I'd just clear that up, as we don't like making mistakes and then allowing them to sit out there. Sorry. When you work as a journalist in a niche market, it is amazing what friends and family send your way that they think might be of interest. Sometimes, usually in fact, it's a story that I'm already aware of, and what follows is a quick conversation around the facts, where I usually check that the person I'm talking to doesn't have any new information that I don't know. We have a little chat, talk about other things, and then we carry on with our day. Today, though, when a mutual friend reached out via direct message, I had a different response because they were sending me details of an upcoming auction being arranged by one Silicon Valley Disposition Inc., a company that specializes in equipment valuation and asset disposition for companies based in the Silicon Valley. The listing, which I'll link to in the show notes below, is for an online-only auction to be held from January 19th, next week, through to January 21st, and it includes 635 lots worth of office furniture, monitors, and laptops. My contact incorrectly thought it might be a surplus sale of equipment from Tesla, but one look at the address told me something very different. 4201 and 4251 Burton Drive, Santa Clara, California. That's the North American home to troubled electric car startup Byton. The very same Byton who announced last week that it had signed a deal with Foxconn and the local government in Nanjing, China, to work together on finally bringing the Byton M-Byte SUV to production. Part of the past deal included a cash injection of $200 million or equivalent. So why is Byton's North American headquarters now seemingly home to a massive sale of assets? Following standard journalistic practices, I've reached out to Byton for comment on this online listing, but as of the time of filming this video, I haven't heard back yet. Of course, if that does change, I'll be sure to let you all know. With no response from Byton or any of its previous employees, we just have to go with what the Silicon Valley Disposition website says and try to piece things together from there. And I think it tells a story that backs up my own gut reaction from last week's news. Byton was entering into a new partnership in China to bring the Byton M-Byte to market, but that didn't mean good things for elsewhere. If you look at the online listing, aside from the usual disclaimers, which includes things like all sales being final, sold as is, etc., the description states, quote, "Incredible offering, a series of sales of late model assets, located in a 50,000 and a 30,000 square foot facility, featuring manufacturing, research and development, FF&E, facility support, and vehicles." End quote. What does this tell us? Well, it helps confirm that, yes, we are indeed talking about Byton, and it suggests that while the current listing does not include anything other than office equipment, we may be seeing a new auction down the road that might include some of the more engineering equipment rather than just office infrastructure. But to be fair, Silicon Valley Disposition is a firm that doesn't specialize in just asset sales for companies that have hit hard times. It also says on its website that it helps everyone from Fortune 500 companies to startups with valuation of and then disposal or auctioning off of old equipment that's no longer being used by said company, or has indeed been replaced by newer, more contemporary, shiny equipment. But if this auction were just a sale of older equipment that had been replaced by newer stuff, I doubt we'd see quite as much in the way of office furniture. Sure, companies are always churning through chairs and tables. It's how I purchased equipment for this company in the past, which saved us literally hundreds of dollars compared to the new prices. But the number of desks and the number of chairs being sold ties in rather nicely with the number of monitors and laptops being sold, aka selling off an entire workforce equipment. Another tell is the age of some of that equipment being sold off. For example, if we look at the large number of Apple MacBook Pros being auctioned, some of the 15-inch Core i7 MacBook Pros with Touch Bar, and they have the Apple A1990 Apple part number. If you look that part number up, you'll see that this particular model of MacBook Pro is less than 2 years old, introduced back in May 2020. That is in fact 2 years younger than the youngest of the computers we use here at the studio. The same is true of the non-Apple laptops listed, and frankly, no startup needs to switch out its computers 2 years after buying them. Byton hit hard times last year, shortly after CES, just as COVID-19 started to ravage the world. Having ploughed most of its investment funds into building a production facility in Nanjing, China, and spending heavily to accelerate its pre-production processes, Byton simply didn't have the cash reserves to help it through the inevitable shutdowns that occurred due to COVID. By April last year, it furloughed about one half of its North American headquarters, which equates to about 450 employees. And a few months after that, it suspended its North American operations entirely for a, quote, 6-month corporate reorganization period. But in addition to those computer monitors, those laptops, and work desks, there's meeting room furniture. There are couches, and what I'm going to refer to as fancy foyer furniture, like artistic stools and chairs. And then there's a couple of full-size refrigerators. And you don't go through the hassle of selling off surplus refrigerators unless you're really cash-strapped. Last week, when we covered the news of Byton's new deal with Foxconn, I questioned the rumoured $200 million cash injection that came with the deal as not really being large enough to keep Byton operating in its current form. As I said at the time, the amount of money needed to simply ensure that there's enough engineers and executives to be paid for 6 months or so in order to finish bringing the M-Byte to production, well, you'd need more money than that. I also voiced a suspicion that the only way such a small investment would actually be enough would be if Byton focused exclusively on Chinese operations, completely ending its European and US operations and becoming Chinese market only, at least for the foreseeable future. However, as I've said before, there is a significant amount of bovine byproduct that is expected when dealing with Chinese startups that come from the fairly common, in large parts of the world, cultural practice of saving face. Promises are frequently made and rarely kept, and while there are companies that seem to buck the trend in this regard, most Chinese automakers that I've dealt with follow that practice of saving face, which is a complex and difficult concept for those of us in guilt-based societies in the West to grasp. Why is this important? Well, in a traditional Western cultural sense, we might see what's going on at Byton as some kind of half-truth, that the auction of a large amount of its assets in Silicon Valley is objectively bad news for the company, and most importantly, that Byton is trying to pull some kind of trick or metaphorical wool over everyone's eyes as to its future prospects. And from a traditional Western guilt-based societal standpoint, it's easy to call Byton out and claim that it's clearly not in a position to be making any promises about bringing the M-Byte to production. But from a Chinese perspective, I might argue that the company is most certainly focusing instead on saving face, and I suspect, culturally, the same conclusions are being drawn in China, but they're just not talked about. That said, it is not impossible that Byton will continue to produce vehicles for China, but as far as elsewhere in the world goes, I think it's done for now. But hey, if you are in the market for buying used computer equipment, or office furniture, or even a refrigerator, it might be worth bidding. Come to think of it, I think I might. That's it for today. As always, thanks to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month Patreons. That's John Lyons, Regine Fellows, Jeffrey Songster, Anonymous Freak, Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, and Tesla in the Gong. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. That's including Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Sean Ueda, Will Graylin, and Ian. You can join all of these fantastic Patreon supporters by following one of the links below, or you can send us a donation through Ko-fi or Bitcoin. You will also find a link to our free Discord server, so sign up and come and join in the fun. And don't forget, if you're in need of some swag, we have plenty over at our merch store at Redbubble. After the names have finished scrolling, you will see a suggestion for a new video to watch, so please consider watching it if you haven't, and I will be back very soon. Thanks for the amazing well wishes. I am now certified as not having cancer, so thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!